Today I thought that I would give you a little tutorial on this little tool called the binding tool. I know a number of you have it. I've sold it in the store for a while. It comes in two different sizes. This is the larger of the two. As we know, once we've finished our quilt, then the last step is putting on the binding. And that's what this tool is going to help us do. Once our binding is sewn, our quilt is complete. Now, normally you have one continuous piece of binding. The general rule of thumb is 2.5 inches wide, and for this tool to work, you do need your binding to be 2.5 inches wide, because that's how wide this ruler is, okay? So generally you will put on, machine sew your binding on, and then you need to finish your final edge. For my demonstration, I just put a couple of pieces together, and I've got two binding on both sides, but that's just for the demonstration. Normally you have one opening. You go all the way around your quilt with your machine, and you come to the end and you leave your 12 inches on either side. We're going to use our tool for two uses today. The first one is we're going to actually use it to sew on our binding, and the second is we're going to make a little table runner. You could expand this to make this into a quilt, or you can make it smaller, you can make it larger, you can do whatever you want. So this is the little tool, and it's called the binding tool. So we're going to start with how you put your binding on. I've got my little sample ready to go, and I've followed their instructions. So the first thing you have to remember is that it says here, printed side always up. So as you're doing every step, make sure that the printed side is always up. It gives you instructions on how to prepare your binding that are self-explanatory. So we've left, as they've requested, a 12-inch opening from our two binding pieces. So we've got our binding sewn on except for our 12 inches. And then the next step, it says to leave yourself a 10-inch tail on either side. So we've left a 10-inch tail on either side. So number 3 explains to you how you actually get your binding tool to make the perfect binding. And we're going to show you, I've pre-marked it with my friction pen, but I'm going to go through this with you. So what it says is to take the blunt end of the ruler and line it up against that seam. So we've done that. Then it asks us to, there's a line here, I'll take it off so you can see it, it says mark here. Okay, so we're going to put that down. You see I've butted that right up to the edge of my binding, and I've put that down. Now I'm going to get my friction pen, and I'm just going to mark this line. Okay, so then what it says to you is that to open this, and using that line, so you can see, I'll extend that down here. You want to put, where it says mark here, you want to put that on your binding, keeping the printed side always up. We've done that, okay? And so then with my friction pen, I pre-drew this, and now we're ready to cut this. So you're just going to take your rotary cutter, go down, and there, take off our little dog ear, and we're done. So straightforward, just put that back there. Now, the diagram here explains how to do the second part of this step, but it's a little confusing. So I'll make it easier for you so you'll be able to do this. So as it says, printed side always up, we're going to butt that up against the edge of our binding. We're going to, where it says mark here, take our friction pen, mark our line. We'll open this up, mark all the way down. But instead of marking this side, this is where this is a little unclear. What you're going to do is you're going to turn your ruler, okay? And then you're going to line your ruler up and you're going to mark as it says, just like that and just like that. And then we're going to trim this. I'm going to show you this 2 times because it's a little confusing, but once you get it, then you get it. So we're just going to trim this and trim this. Okay. We're going to show you a second time just because the ruler is a little confusing, but after we've done it the second time, you should be a little more familiar and be able to make it work for you. So we followed their instructions. We've left a 12-inch opening and we've got 2 10-inch tails on our binding. So where the next instruction says to butt the edge of this right to the edge of your binding, bring your binding over and draw a mark. Okay, so we've drawn the mark. We'll open our binding. We've drawn the mark all the way up. Okay, so we'll do the same on this side. We will butt that up against the edge, and where it says mark, we'll put our mark all the way up. Okay, so now we're going to, on this one, we're going to put this down and we're going to use our friction pen like we've done to draw our 45-degree angle, and we're going to trim this. So we'll just go like that and like that. Now, when you go to do the other side, and it doesn't matter which side gets which end, when you go to do the other end, instead of the tool, the point being on that end of the mark, maybe this will be easier to explain, what we're going to do, you see there's the tool and the mark goes that way. What we're doing here is there's the tool and the mark's going that way. So the bulk of the tool goes this way. Whereas on this side, the bulk of the tool went that way. So on one of your ends, the bulk of the tool goes to the left, and on the other end, the bulk of the tool goes to the right. So we've done that. We'll open this up and we'll put our mark, remembering that the printed side is always up. So, and we'll give this a trim and we'll sew our binding. We're ready to sew our 2 pieces together, and then our binding is complete. So what I always do when I'm sewing my edges together, because they don't, it wants to tug on your quilt. So I just take either a Wonder Clip, I don't have one with me, a Wonder Clip or a big pin, and I just temporarily pin my quilt together, and that allows me to have room to work with my binding and it not being tugged by the quilt, because the quilt's much heavier than the binding. So we've just put a pin in here, it doesn't matter how big, just so you've got your quilt top is smaller than your opening now. Okay, so then what we're going to do is we are just going to take our binding, and you can only do this one way. You were lining this up on the opposite edge. So the top of that goes to the bottom of that, just like when we're sewing our binding. It's on the 45-degree angle, and you always sew from the top left to the bottom right. So I'll put a pin in here, and that's what I've done. I've lined up my 2 edges. I'll put my pin in here, and I'll just go to the machine, and we're going to stitch this with a standard size stitching that you've used for your whole sewing of your quilt. All right, so we're at our machine, and we're just going to stitch. That's the 1/4 inch, so we're just going to put that in And we're just going to, using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, we're just going to come down our little binding piece here. And we're done. All right, so we've sewn our strip together. You just have to make sure that right sides are together, wrong sides are together, and there's your 45-degree angle. Okay, we've taken this out of the machine now. Now we're ready to finish sewing this to our quilt. So we'll take our pin out, and the magic of the tool, our binding fits just perfectly. So this will be our final stitch on our binding, and we're just going to go down here, and you see it fits perfectly. I'll just show you. And there's our binding, all sewn. Fits perfectly, and it will work every time if you follow those easy instructions. Two of our binding tool you can use to make a French braid quilt. You can make it any size you want as far as the width of each one of your braids. And if you want to make it scrappy, then you don't have to pre-audition it. I've just got these out here so we can give you an idea. Great way to use up scraps or a jelly roll, because this is a 2.5 inch strip. And I just want to mention one thing to you. If you're using cotton, regular cotton has a wrong side and a right side. When you're cutting using this tool, you can't have a jelly roll strip as it comes off the roll. You have to open it up, because you want one angle this way and you want the other angle this way. And if you cut this is how it comes off the roll. If you cut this without opening it up, you'll have one going one direction and the other going the same direction. So it won't work. You need to open these up so that you've got a V for each one of your pieces. If you're using batiks, sometimes it's really hard to tell the right and wrong side of batiks, so you could cut off the roll or off the 2 inch strip using this, because you would never be able to tell which of those was the right and the wrong side. So I use some cotton and some batiks in there, but just so you know, if you're using cotton, you need this V. If you're using batiks, you can cut 2 using this. Individually for cotton, a pair with the batiks. So what I've done is I auditioned my little start of my braid quilt. So when you're sewing this quilt, this one always starts at the bottom. And what you're going to do is, this is my bottom, and I'm going to take, just as you see it here, I'm going to take this piece, and I'm going to take this piece, and I'm just going to stitch right there. So I'll go to my sewing machine, just do a quick stitch, just so you get an idea. Now normally I would press this, but just for this exercise, I'm not going to. So you see now you've started your V. So you would just press that up there. So this went to this, and now you're gonna, using this tool, you get this nice angle like that. So your strip is straight, and you'll know if you got it wrong if these don't line up. There's only one way that the tool will work to make this work, and you'll know. So say for example, I tried to put that in. You see, I've got that jog. You don't want that jog, so this one will only work on the left side. So let's replace that with that. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to take your next strip and you're going to sew it onto here. When you get your sewing done, that'll all line up on the edge. I'll just do one more for you, just so you can see the edges line up. All right, so no pressing for this, just use my hand. So you see, and you just continue to go up. See how that nicely meets there, and that would do the same there. So when you get this done, it's actually quite wide, so it will finish 10 inches when you get your rows done. So each one of your rows will be 10 inches. I wanted mine just a little smaller for my table runner, so I trimmed these down, and I trimmed these down to 7 inches. And then with your seam allowance, you're going to lose a ½ inch, so these are 6½ inches each. So if you were making a bigger quilt, you could use this, but if you wanted to just make a little table runner, you use the same tool. It's the 2½ width. I've just trimmed down the size on the sides, but I cut it all using this, and I put it together using this, and I thought it was just a bit big, so I thought, well, I'll just trim it down so the scale looks a little better. So it's called the binding tool, and once you get your binding on a few times, you'll figure out this tool works every single time. It's just a little confusing in their instructions, but once you get it, you get it. So you can use this for binding, and you can use this to make a quilt. So thanks for watching, and hope you enjoy using this tool. We've got it in the shop right now, and we will continue to carry it. As long as our supplier carries it, we'll carry it. Thanks for joining us.